Yes, sir.
Take you through one exercise, so which I learned that aids digestion. So like I would request you to raise your palm. Everyone please. And touch your nose. Just look at what are the people sitting beside you and how many of them has touched their nose. So it's like not important that what you listen, it's important what you see. So what I'm going to talk about today is assurance in DevOps world. So skipping on for the introduction, like taking you to the agenda for the day is, I'll talk about how the assurance function has evolved over time. Then I'll talk about the DevOps, the business drivers, and the DevOps model. Then I'll spend some time on the automation scope for the assurance services. And then I'll also talk on the reimagination of the assurance organization and defining the roles in the assurance organization. And then I'll talk about the success factors for embarking on DevOps journey. So in today's assurance organization, you will primarily see, or any organization, you primarily see that assurance is a separate entity in its own. So it may roll up to a single leadership, but 2 or 3 layers below the CIO, assurance, the development, the maintenance and support, they form their own organizations. And the assurance organization as such evolved from a kind of a dependent subunit within the development organization into an independent unit or organization in itself. However, we see that changing to a more of a collaborative organization that works with the development and the operation supports organization. The challenge in adopting DevOps is like, there are organizations, the enterprise organizations, which are heavily invested in this matured assurance organization concepts or models. So you have the test factory, you have the test COE setup, and the clients are heavily invested in those areas. Now, DevOps knocking at the door, they want to understand how they want to move away from that model without impacting their cost, without impacting their OpEx. No, I'm losing time. That's so in simple terms, DevOps is like the agile function extended to bring your operations team together. The primary drivers being the faster time to market, fewer deployment failures. Bottom line, we are bringing in superior quality of code in a more faster way. So when I go on to explain the DevOps model, so you see the distinct organizations, the business organizations, the development organizations, the QA organizations, and the support organizations. So there are coordinating and collaborating and sharing in between them. You have principles of continuous integration, continuous development, continuous deployment. I'm sorry for that. Thanks, Pavitra. So these are the type of change. Earlier, Vijay was referencing like, what are the challenges that you have? So this is like one more challenge. So you have principles of continuous integration, continuous development, continuous testing applied to it. You have automated test environment provisioning, automated test data generation, and In addition to that, you have lot of communication, lot of change management practices going into it. The primary forces that aligns the organization in a DevOps world, automation being one of the important aspects. The culture is the second important aspect. The next important aspects are the metrics and sharing. In terms of metrics like you identify the baseline metrics, you baseline those metrics, and you continuously monitor in a PDCA cycle to understand where you need improvement, and you bring about those improvements. And obviously, you perform sharing in terms of best practices, ideas, and information. So when I go on to explaining the scope of automation for assurance organization as a whole, so during the planning phases, you have the testing or the assurance organization coming up and defining the test environment requirements, infrastructure requirements. You define the testability of requirements through automation. In the coding phase, you have your developers writing the functional code. Who is going to write, because you have automation in place, who is going to write the code to test that functional code? So it's the assurance team is writing unit testing code using TDD practices. During the build process, again, which is automated, so you have the unit testing and the quality, static quality analysis done through integrated frameworks, which you integrate with your continuous integration process. In the testing phase, once you have the binary, you put the binary in the artifact repository. Now you want to promote the binary into your QA environment. So during that time, you automatically provision your, or on demand, you provision your test environments. You use automated test generation frameworks to generate the test data. You ensure that you have test data with sufficient quality, or else you'll not be able to perform certain tests in a production environment. Once you have your environment ready, you kickstart a lot of automated testing right from the functional, your performance, your non-functional, and your security testing as well. During this testing process, you identify a lot of errors. So you have already put up an automated defect management workflow, which will route the defect to the developer, which will prioritize the defect and help in faster resolution. The concepts like service virtualization, feature toggle, performance monitoring are in use. And when I say feature toggle, it's not in terms of the functional code, it is in terms of your test framework. So you need not to perform all the types of testing for each and every change. So your framework has to be integrated and need to have that capacity to understand and let you be flexible enough to choose what type of testing you need to prioritize for. During the deployment phase, you also use the service virtualization, feature toggle, and performance monitoring, and then you go to the operate phase. Now that I have defined the scope of automation, so how do you perform all these automation? So by now, you have already got a hint that in DevOps, you have to go for more like a run a pilot. You need not go on a big bang approach. So when you are running that pilot, so you need to create a business case of your organization so that they will readily adopt it in a larger aspect. So you identify SME teams. The SME teams, primarily, they will consist of the test environment SME and the test automation SMEs. The test environment SMEs will primarily cater into the test environment provisioning needs and the test data generation needs. And the test automation SME, they will define the roadmap for the frameworks. They will integrate those frameworks, and they will build the frameworks ground up. Also, as part of this pilot, they will also mentor a core BAU team. The core BAU team will be responsible for propagating the learnings of the DevOps to the larger team for a larger adoption. So when you have successfully implemented a couple of pilots, you want to go and implement it in a bigger projects. So to handle those kind of bigger projects, you'll again need test environment engineers, the test automation engineers, and the test execution engineers. The role of the test execution engineers is like they will understand lot of, because through the automated testing, we'll have lot of metrics coming in, you have lot of logs coming in, you have lot of reports coming in. So you need to do a deep dive analysis in those reports to identify what are your true errors versus what are the false positives in that report. So to do that, you will have the test execution engineers. On the bottom, like there will be support functions who will manage the knowledge aspects. There will be a governance aspects, and there will be a demand and capacity planning aspects. So the support functions will support that. Going on to the next, like how do the roles change and whether your existing roles or how do the roles map to each other. And from our perspective, we define it like the test environment SMEs and the test automation SMEs. They are mostly like the test managers and the test automation architect in the organization. They will assume the role of test environment SME and test automation SME in a DevOps organization. In a BAU team, they will have the test environment engineers, the test automation engineers, the test execution engineers. So they will be like kind of a test analyst, the testers or automation testers in your present organization. And support functions primarily will be your portfolio test managers or the test managers in the organization. So moving on to what are the challenges that is there in the DevOps for the assurance community. So the challenges are threefold, like people, process, and technology. So the first challenge is the DevOps brings a plethora of tools, lot of technologies, and there are severe skill gaps in terms of for decades you have told a community to treat code as a black box. So now suddenly to adopt to a mindset where they see code not as a black box, but as a gray box or even a white box. So there is that severe skill gap that you need to address. In addition to that skill gap, there is the fear psyche, because you have told a group of people that they need to focus only on the GUI screens, not go into the backend, and now suddenly you are telling the group of people to go and do some coding, do some testing around it. So there is that fear psyche, like what are the skill sets that I need, whether I'm getting irrelevant in this market. Then the next challenge is like breaking of the unseen walls. So you are bringing in QA, you are bringing in the developers, you are bringing in the operations, and now you are telling them to work together as a team. But for decades, there were finger pointings, and there were, whenever there is an issue or crisis, they were all finger pointings at each other. And suddenly you are telling those group of people to come together in a closely set up. The next thing is the change management aspects. So you have already understood like you need to implement change management, but to successfully implement those change management aspects and whether you have adopted the practices within your code, that is again a challenge. You might feel that your organization has changed, but the change management process is also has sequential steps like the unfreeze, the change, and then the freeze. So if you just in trying to rush things, you skip one of the steps, then the results might be different. So how do we see the road ahead of us is firstly the developing of the one team mindset. So when you bring any 3 or 4 people together, so they will go through the stages of team formation like the forming, norming, storming, and then they will reach a level of performing. So that will take some time to go there. So allow that time, give sufficient time to the team to get adjusted to the new setup, and then expect performance out of it. Then again, the sustenance of the OCM program. So like I mentioned, the change has its own cycle. So you have to allow sufficient time for organization to unfreeze. You have to allow sufficient time to accept that change, and then you need to institutionalize that change. If you want to skip any of these steps, you might think there can be two results, like either they will reject it straight away, or else you will see they will accept it, but they will not accept it in their core. So you might see a rise in performance, but again it will die down soon. The bridging of the skill gap, so it's a fact that within the assurance community there are certain skill gaps that we need to bridge, and you have to ensure that you are doing the right thing to bridge the skill gaps. Then organizing the QA team, just I mentioned. So during the ramp-up process or during the initiation process, you will have to bring in SMEs. You have to allow the SME, learn from the SMEs. Then you build up your larger team, and then you slowly take the SMEs out of the picture, and then let the larger team function. Then the second last point is the senior management sensitivity. So the senior management has to be sensitive of the people aspects. So you might bring a lot of tools and technology into your portfolio, but if you're not sensitive about the people aspects of change, you might not be able to successfully sustain the DevOps program. And we have seen that in a lot of customers. The customers are coming back saying, we have adopted CI, we have adopted CD, but still we are not able to perform, we are not able to deliver what we want to do. And lastly, the mindset for continuous improvement. So you have to have a mindset of continuous improvement, because DevOps is kind of a mindset, and there is no true acme for performance. So you need to continuously learn and continuously grow and carry on forward. So it's like it's not only to the assurance community to do all the things, so it needs equal collaboration and participation from the development community, from the operations support community, to form a DevOps team. And then only the DevOps program will be sustainable and successful. So with this thought, I end today's presentation. So if you have any questions, you can let me know, or there is the email which you can write to, of course. Any questions? Okay, thank you for your time.